So we've recently heard of Boris's new hire is going to be Guto Harri. This is Director of Communications.
Yeah.
Following the resignation of the previous occupant over Partygate. Now, I think you remember Guto Harri. He's the absolute cretin who took the knee live on GB News. If we can just play this clip.
And he got fired for it.
I may have underestimated how
good job
close to
too,
the
as well.
surface the racism still was.
And he
I
just
actually now
live
get
on
it.
air
And
says,
so
I think
much so
taking the
that
knee
I
is a
think,
good idea. We should all support
take the knee. In
blah,
fact,
blah,
why
blah, and
not
bam,
take the
off he
knee
goes.
now and just
I think he was
say
trying to
it's a
say,
gesture,
he was
but
trying
it's
to
an
push this
important
Black Lives
gesture.
Matter thing because
And,
he fancies
it's
the
not
girl
about me
that
in
was
the
sitting
studio,
next to him.
but for them to do that as footballers on the field makes...
But yeah, so he was with GB News, and then he got fired for taking the knee, and then he went on to become the press secretary for Downing Street.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so his life is obviously in free fall. I hope when I get fired from GB News, I don't end up as the press secretary for any for Downing Street.
Yep, he's also an arch Remainer, as we can see here.
His heart was in it. He's a sufficiently uniquely good communicator that he almost single-handedly helped deliver 17 million people to vote for this course of action. But in the end, having secured that victory, clearly Michael Gove, among others, had some doubts, grave doubts, about whether Boris was going to deliver on what he persuaded the British public to vote for. And there lies the mistake in the end, a miscalculation on a key issue of our day, and he's paid the price for it. The rest of us are paying quite heavily for it as well.
So that was a clip from 2016, before Guto Harri was known to GB News, before GB News was even a thing, and we just missed the start of that clip there, but he says Boris's heart wasn't in Remain.
Yeah.
Sorry, it wasn't in
Leave.
in
Well, yeah,
Leave.
Boris flip-flopped in the issue. He saw an
Right.
opportunity to, for self-aggrandizement, which is Boris's main motivation. The TV's gone off as well. Have you not been keeping up on the payment plan?
I don't know what's going on, but we'll get through it. Sorry, do carry on.
So yeah, Boris wrote pieces in, I think, The Spectator and somewhere else as well. Actually, saying Europe's great. We should be in Europe. And obviously that was the official sort of Tory party position as well. But then Boris saw a chance to sort of take the other tack and basically get his face in the papers. And
this is what a lot of people thought at the time. Well, Boris, Mayor of London and everything, he's not really pro-Brexit or pro-Leave. He's probably pro-EU, but this seems like a good political gamble to get a load of million new voters for a later PM bid. And it certainly worked out, but not in the way he expected. And I remember seeing the photos of him coming out after the vote was declared. And you would have expected, having won a seismic political victory, that he would at least manage a smile. But he looked like someone had just died. Do you remember that?
It's funny when people... There was a hint of that in Trump's face when he won, because Trump wasn't expecting to win. He was you could see he was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to do the job now. I just wanted to, have some fun. But yeah.
But in true Welsh fashion, Guto Harri accepted the offer with a sing-song, as the Daily Mail reports here. Quote, and we both laughed. Then I asked, are you going to survive, Boris? And he said, in his deep, slow and purposeful voice, and started to sing a little while finishing the sentence and saying, I will survive. I inevitably invited him to say, you've got all your life to live. And he replied, I've got all my love to give. So we had a little blast from Gloria Gaynor. No one expects that, but it was. There was a lot of laughter, and we sat down to have a serious conversation about how to get the government back on track and how we are moving forward. He's not all that clownish, he added, but he's a very likeable character. 90% of our discussion was very serious, but it shows he's a character and he has fun. He's not a vicious man, as some misrepresent him. It seems almost stereotypical that a Welshman starts a job at Downing Street with a song. I wonder if Lloyd George, when he got in 100 years ago, he started off by singing Men of Harlech on the way through.
Although John Redwood, when he was, who's a big lever, when John Redwood was Welsh secretary, there's that amazing clip of him trying to sing along to the Welsh national anthem, and he doesn't know the words. You think the first thing, if you're going to be Welsh secretary, the first thing you're going to learn is the words to the national anthem. But he tries to bluff it out by miming along. It's like, I don't know if you've ever watched Squid Game with the English dubbing. It's sort of like that. It was proper kung fu movie.
Right.
He's just like, ooh.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. And it can be very awkward with that. But you've never been in that situation, right, where everyone's singing a song and you're just sort of looking around and mouthing the words. That's never happened to you?
Yeah, but I'm not the Welsh secretary.
Yeah.
So
no, that is quite funny when that happened. But rounding out his bingo card of subversive leftist ideas, what do we have next? So it turns out that between GB News and working for Boris Johnson, Guto has worked as a useful idiot for the Chinese Communist Party.
Has anybody
He
not
has indeed
worked for the Chinese? I'm starting to feel left out.
I know. No Chinese shills, as far as I'm aware, on this podcast. John, we suspect sometimes, the producer John, but I think
That's racist.
So here we go. Boris Johnson was forced to defend his new spin doctor within hours of him starting work today after it was revealed he was lobbying the government for Huawei, which is not that one.
That sounds like somebody from Newcastle would say.
Yeah. It was confirmed at lunchtime that over the past 2 years he had lobbied the government on behalf of tech giant Huawei, who were barred from building the UK's 5G network amid claims the Chinese state could use it to spy on the British.
Yeah.
At a lobby briefing this afternoon with Mr. Harri in the room, the PM spokesman said he provided advice to the clients of a private company. It's entirely legitimate, it's public domain, and obviously we would not exclude from government someone with valuable experience and expertise. So it's amazing how at times they almost manage to sound grown up. Which is quite nice. And The Guardian reports here as well. Guto Harri, who was appointed Number 10's press chief on Monday in the wake of Partygate resignations, reportedly asked Sir Eddie Lister which ministers he could nudge for help. He met Lister, who was then the Prime Minister's chief of staff, as well as the 3 top executives from the technology firm Huawei, which has links to the ruling Chinese Communist Party, on the 2nd of June 2020, according to The Sun. To say it has links with the CCP feels like saying Krupp had links with Hitler's war machine. I mean, it's part of the CCP at this point. I don't think that's unfair to say. It's widely understood to be an arm of the Chinese intelligence service. I was going to quote a 600-page French strategy report, but I couldn't be bothered. So, yeah, but we shall go into that another time. They continue. The paper said that Harri, representing lobbying firm Hawthorne Advisors, used the 25-minute video call to ask which ministers to approach at a time when the security service was reviewing the risk of allowing the firm into the UK's core telecommunications network. Do you remember this story last year, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
That was a big kerfuffle about, should we have China, should we not?
Yeah. And there's also issues with the phones. So the phones weren't going to be updated with the proper operating systems. There's, I think Google Play apps wouldn't be installed on the phones because they make really good phones apparently. Really good cameras that you can use to spy on citizens.
Great microphones, great voice recognition, face recognition,
really good encryption. But yeah, so there were issues around the phones as well. So basically anything from China, because as you say, the tech, any big business in China is basically state controlled.
Yeah. They have a very interesting way of taking control of them as well. A lot of the time they'll put party members on the board, so there's always someone watching. And a lot of the time they'll be very preferential. So there'll be close ties, as I understand it, between CCP top brass and people in the big companies. And they'll use this sort of personal network of connections, which the Chinese call guangxi, to do business. And so that means, while it looks from a Western perspective like complete subversion and corruption, it's somewhat more understandable from a Chinese perspective.
Yeah. And the way they actually transition from a completely state-controlled economy to a sort of state capitalist economy is quite interesting. So they didn't have this complete revolution where they just completely privatized everything like they did in Russia, which was a disaster because it leads to cronyism and corruption and the state assets being sold at just fire sale prices. So Chinese companies, if they were more productive than other companies, could produce extra and then sell that at a market rate.
Right.
So then gradually over time, the stuff that was being produced for the market rate, grew to be a larger and larger part of the economy. So it was quite a smooth, overall, on a macro level, quite a smooth transition to a capitalist system, but still maintaining the control structures.
No, that is quite remarkable. But then I think the questions really come in terms of the rule of law in China, because the understanding I have is that rule of law does not really exist. There's a sort of, it can be very arbitrary as to whether your business is on the right side or the wrong side of the firing line. And a lot of that depends on how well you play the political game. Yeah.
I mean, the government, as well as controlling business, they also control the criminal justice system and the courts. So it's a lot like Scotland. So, similar levels of chances of getting a fair trial.
Yeah, I imagine so. Especially if you post something dodgy online.
Yeah.
Both sides.
Yeah. Misgendering a senior member of the CCP. That'd be the ultimate Scottish/Chinese crime.
Did you know you can't even name senior members of the CCP on Weibo.
Oh, really?
They're name blocked. No
especially
one
if you're not,
actually-
especially if you're a tennis player and one of them like nonce you.
Well, that's actually one of the interesting features of that case. But we'll get on to
Yeah,
that in
yeah.
the next segment in a second. So in this discussion about Huawei, he said, this PM, meaning Boris, is not anti-China and is not Donald Trump, adding that Johnson believes in good relationships with China. He is not coming from a negative place in any way. He's coming from Eton. I'd describe that as a pretty negative place, but there we go. He added, we are caught. We want the technology, 5G. We want it rolled out. There's an American concern and a parliamentary concern. There are a large number of MPs across the political divide who have a problem with China. Some are Atlanticists, some over COVID, some over Hong Kong, some over human rights. And I imagine he stopped there because he could just carry on at that point and just listing all of the problems that people might have with China at this point, because I don't think it's very popular on the world stage.
No.
And then finally, we have this report here, British using Chinese CCTV linked to repression of Uyghurs. Now, I'm always slightly sceptical when I hear linked to in a headline, because usually the link can be very, very tenuous, but not in this case, it turns out. Schools, councils, police forces and government departments are using Chinese surveillance cameras linked to the repression of the Uyghurs, data shared with the Times shows. Hikvision and Dahua, both Chinese state-owned companies like Huawei, have been blacklisted by US authorities over their links to the systematic oppression of Muslim Uyghurs in China. British officials and rights campaigners say they provide the technological infrastructure for Chinese concentration camps. Now, where do you think these might be stalled? Because we have so many cameras in this country, right? London has, or had at one point, more CCTV per unit area than anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
It's quite remarkable. Well, now it seems like all of those cameras are being bought at cut price from Chinese companies who may or may not be using them for nefarious ends. Thousands of public institutions in Britain are thought to have installed them, which they watch school pupils, government workers, and members of the public. Many of the devices have advanced surveillance capabilities, including facial, gender, and behaviour detection. Gender detection is pretty good. Raising alarm among privacy advocates.
Yeah, behaviour detection is a really worrying thing. So they can use whatever cues you're giving off. The algorithm can actually recognise when they think you're up to something
They think
dodgy.
you're loitering about to pull out a spray can and daub Boris sucks.
Yeah, if your eyes shift side to side, then they know you're about to do some shoplifting. But and the
Really,
facial,
that's the thing.
yeah, and the facial recognition on these things is terrifying as well. I mean, obviously, we know the technology is there. We can see in Google Photos and all the rest of it. Recognizes faces. But yeah, this is. We've had it in this country for quite a while now with ANPR, so number plate recognition,
right?
Which is you can track cars going through. I remember when I worked for the police, you could track cars going across London. Then if it went into a borough that didn't have ANPR, the car would disappear for a while and then reappear. But with facial, recognition, there's so much opportunity for this to be exploited to nefarious ends. So, if somebody's a political dissident, or say for example, it's a government in a Middle Eastern government that wants to crack down on homosexuals or something. These algorithms can actually recognize. They've got basically gaydar, like an actual gaydar. I'm not even joking. Right. They can recognize people's sexuality and stuff. So, it's really, and obviously ethnicity and things like that can be programmed in. So, if you've got a racist, homophobic government, then, these cameras can really speed up their process of
so you should be
discrimination.
concerned about this, like wherever you are on the political spectrum, unless you're actually in Downing Street, you should be extremely worried about this stuff, because it seems like they've just quietly instituted a system which can watch and track everyone in the country almost. And no one voted for that, as I recall. I don't recall a referendum or any kind of discussion on the subject. It just quietly comes in through the back door. Yeah,
and the advantages seem, slightly nebulous. I mean, it's nice to be able to apprehend crooks and things, but how many of those are going to be real crooks, and how many are going to be somebody who accidentally misgendered someone or fell foul of one of the new laws that they're bringing through?
Yeah, it does seem like a very slippery slope. Suddenly we lose all of the ability to conduct ourselves anonymously and in relative freedom and peace and security without being constantly watched and surveilled all of the time. We lose that, and in return, maybe some terrorists get caught or something. It doesn't seem like a good trade-off.
Yeah.
It seems very dystopian, to be honest. Very Big Brother. Apparently, more than half of secondary schools in England, according to their Freedom of Information requests, use Hikvision or Dahua cameras, with 386 of 676 respondents saying they were installed. That's already over half of our secondary schools in the country use these Chinese cameras. Oof. A school in Surrey said its surveillance system had object and demographic detection. A school in Brent said its China-made cameras are capable of detecting gender and clothing. The East Riding of Yorkshire said that their CCTV units could identify fights occurring, track people, clothing colour searching, hair colour and length detection, all of the stuff that you were talking about. And, oh my goodness, that just sounds horrendous. I feel like... I don't know if you've seen V for Vendetta. We did a podcast on it a while ago. But there's one point where I think people go around spray canning security cameras and things like that.
Right.
You see it as quite a common trope in dystopian fiction. I do quite like that idea. I wouldn't advocate anyone to do that, of course, but I do quite like the idea.
I don't like the parking ones either. I got caught by a parking one and I had to pay all this money because they caught. I was like 4 minutes over the time or something. Mm-hmm. And I think we should cut them down with hacksaws.
Yeah, and finally, the Metropolitan Police is among 15 police forces found to use Hikvision and Dahua, and 35 hospitals and 49 universities also had surveillance systems supplied by them. One hospital has a face-detecting Hikvision camera at its A&E entrance. But theoretically, you could probably track what medical procedures people are having done, just by tracking their movements and timings and comings and goings.
See how they're walking when they leave.
Yeah. No, exactly. So it is a somewhat troublesome world that we are entering, and it might look a lot like communist China.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast of the Lotuses, you can go and support us at lotuseaters.com. We don't do any adverts, so that's how we're funded, and you get access to all of our premium content, such as this series of articles by John Wheatley about reading the future in propaganda. I won't spoil it, but like I said, if you like to support us, you can get parts 1, 2, and 3 is now out. If you did find this interesting, you can always congratulate John Wheatley on his excellent analysis on Getter.com. Follow him just at John Wheatley. Thanks very much.